This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it's Monday. It's November 27th, 2023. TheTruthCentral.com. We're doing broadcasts every weekday. This is going to be an interesting week and period coming up. We've got the climate crisis being highlighted. We're now going to have the Dubai meeting, COP, whatever number it is, which is the International Climate Meeting for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The United Nations will be very prominent there. And the theme I want to develop today at some length is that we are going through an intentional weakening of the West, destruction of the United States. It's intentional. Those who have crafted the various policies we're dealing with, climate change, etc., know that this is all going to dramatically weaken the ability of the economies, Western economies in particular, to function in a vital way as modern industrialized states. And the anti-capitalism forces here, which are behind the construction of these very destructive ideas, are in fact what's stimulating the age of disinformation in which we live. And it's an attempt to gain control of populations. It's an attempt to impose totalitarianism. The Neo-Marxists who are dominating the universities will soon be replaced by the World Economic Forum, who will have no use for them. They'll be the first to be eliminated. And the goal here is for a small oligarchy, the Bill Gateses of the world, to control the Earth's resources for themselves, regarding the rest of us as needless, and depopulation is at the center of a lot of these ideas. Now, I want to illustrate this by showing you some of the articles that are current today. One is that our air travel is going to be restricted by carbon allowances. Okay, so there's a major report which has been co-authored by a travel agency called Intrepid Travel and the Future Labs Institute, which show basically that the sustainable future for travel means travel extinction, essentially, because we're going to have personal carbon allowances that will restrict how often you're able to travel. So with carbon passports, digital carbon passports, we're can expect a pushback against the frequency with which individuals can travel, with carbon passports set to change the tourism landscape worldwide. So these allowances are going to be manifests as passports that force people to ration their carbon in line with the global carbon budget. By 2040, we can expect to see limitations imposed on the amount of travel that is permitted each year. Experts suggest that individuals should currently limit their carbon emissions to 2.3 tons each year, the equivalent of taking a round trip from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to Saudi Arabia. However, the average carbon footprint in the U.S. is 16 tons per person per year. So that would mean a dramatic reduction in the carbon footprint. And as a result, your standard of living is going to be determined by your energy usage, and reducing a society's energy usage is the same as reducing its living standards. So if we have to go to 2.3 tons of carbon output per year as our carbon footprint, forget about traveling anywhere. It's going to be about an 86% reduction of lifestyle in the United States. These are just the facts. These are the realities of what this carbon craziness, carbon dioxide insanity is meaning. And the forces behind this know this. That's what's so disturbing about this. I mean, I've been writing a series of books trying to explain this, and I would encourage people to really take a look at my most current book, which is this Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. I'm going to refer to a couple books today, but this one in particular, which is just now out, we're just now starting to promote it, this one here, demonstrates that really the whole movement of the climate craziness and the woke craziness has to do with cultural revolution designed to oppose God, oppose family, break up traditional values, and impose censorship on anyone who disagrees. It's not permitted to disagree with these people because they cannot argue successfully their position. It's not fact-based. Now, secondly, we've got a war on the car. Okay, now the car, again, this is another report by Net Zero Watch, which is a very good website for taking a look at what really is going on in this climate craziness movement. But there's a move to say people shouldn't have so many cars and shouldn't be able to drive so much because they have too many carbon dioxide emissions. This goes back to the 70s when essentially you were trying to say that there was an energy crisis and we had to limit that. We thought we were running out of oil at that time, running out of gasoline, which of course did not happen. That was based on the idea that hydrocarbon fuels are fossil fuels. They are not. They're produced by the earth on an ongoing basis. The chemistry is really fairly simple. What's the basis of all this decarbonization agenda and attacking the motor car, especially after the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, you find that the Europeans are especially leading the charge to do various things like saying you can't have diesel engines, you have to have electric cars. Electric cars are not a solution to anything. Electric cars take far more hydrocarbon fuels to produce, and the mining for rare earth minerals, which devastates a lot of the countries. In fact, as child labor and in third world countries producing lithium and other rare earth minerals. But the idea is going to be here that you're not going to be able to have a car that generates carbon dioxide, and cars are going to increase dramatically in price so that you'll get car credits. And if you don't buy a car, those credits could be sold to someone wealthy who wants to buy a car. So in a sense, these schemes are going to be designed to have the poor give up their automobiles in order to allow the oligarchs, the rich, to live in luxury with their cars. Again, this whole car industry, which is undergoing the transition to electric vehicles, is losing billions of dollars. At the same time, cities are putting up these zones, which are the concentrated zones in the congested areas of central cities. It was just done in New York City, where there's going to be a new tax for driving your car in these ultra areas, which are designed for low emission zones, LEZs. You're going to hear a lot more about LEZs. Great Britain has put up a lot of monitors to monitor the cars coming into these LEZs and tax them, because you're not supposed to be driving your cars with carbon dioxide. You'll see, because of the congestion, it's mostly they want the congestion in central cities reduced. They'd probably be happy to have no cars at all and have people be limited to 15-minute cities where they could only walk or ride bicycles. So the idea of tracking every vehicles, which they are going to plan to do, is sinister and wrong in terms of freedom of being able to travel and move around. So you're going to have road pricing with a high level of taxation on fuel, and also the taxation of where you drive that car. If you drive in congested areas or into cities, you're going to be taxed again. All this is going to require massive amounts of monitoring, and the cars are going to be equipped in the future with features where if you decide to go over certain limits, the government can turn off your car and make it so it doesn't work. Kill switches, or switches which reduce your ability to get gasoline, or other monitors, which will again end up in restricting freedom and restricting travel. The argument is basically that, if you've increased your use of electrification, you are inherently destroying the economy, the environment, because you're burning up too much carbon dioxide, releasing too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then the third thing is not only restricting travel, it's also now restricting food, and the war on food is accelerating. This has been highlighted. Mark Morano is highlighting some stories in The Guardian, which say that dairy and farm, beef, cattle farming, meat and dairy are going to have to be reined back to reach the net zero goal by 2050. The impact of farming on climate is going to be a key United Nations COP28 topic in Dubai. Global food production must become sustainable to stay within this 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide. So a third of the world's food production is at risk from the climate crisis. This is what The Guardian is writing. Research has found. But at the same time, our food systems are one of the key contributors to climate breakdown. Greenhouse gas emissions from farming and the land use change that accompanied it, such as clearing forests and drying out wetlands to make room for crops and livestock, amount to more than a fifth of total global carbon output. This is according to the IPCC of the UN. So there's an intentional goal to depopulate, which is at the core of this carbon dioxide craze. Now, the argument we're going to make in this podcast is that this would be justified if the science really did say that carbon dioxide was a major element of causing a dangerous acceleration in the Earth's temperature. It's just not true. That's a little detail that the climate movement forgets, but it just isn't true. Now, I want to transition for a moment here to comment on a couple things with the free book we're offering, and I want you to take a look at this on the thetruthcentral.com. You can get a copy of this book, The Coming Global Economic Crash, How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush, by calling Swiss America, 1-800-519-6268. It's happened over the last two crises, or three crises, when we had Jimmy Carter and the oil embargo, followed by stagflation. By 1980, gold had gone from $35 an ounce in 1971, when President Nixon took us off the gold standard, to $843 an ounce. Then 2008, 2009, with the collapse of the subprime mortgage market, and we're going through again another collapse of the mortgage market with interest rates as high as they are, and a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at about 8% right now. Gold went in 2010 to $1,426 an ounce, and with COVID, another economic crisis, gold hit an all-time high on March 8th, 2022 of $2,074.60. This book discusses a lot of trends you've got to know about. It discusses in detail how China is burning incredible amounts of coal, does not care about this global warming crisis except to give it lip service for attending national meetings, about how the energy crisis is going to cause a massive increase in inflation, where the economies are essentially collapsing. Germany is finding itself in the middle of a deindustrialization period, which is fairly alarming. And what it predicts is that we're going to go to a digital currency, central bank digital currency, a rise of more control by central governments in monitoring people. And it discusses at length the BRIC nations, the rise of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, now bringing in OPEC countries. Get a copy of the book. It's free. Coming Global Crash will create an historic gold rush. 1-800-519-6268. Swiss America is also still offering this Walking Liberty $50 first-time introductory offer where you can get up to 250 of these coins just by filling out the form on our website. You can buy them at exactly the price, or very close to the price for which they are worth today in silver. Secondly, people are saying I'm looking younger. My hair's gotten color back. I'm not coloring it. Take a look at, I'm going to be doing much more on this, Live Longer and Better. It's a new book on Carbon 60, which is our sponsor on the My Vital C. And you can see the sponsors at the top of the website under the sponsor tab. Now I'm going to ask you, Chris, to comment in a minute, but I'm going to pivot here to climate science and point out that this is essentially madness. There's a very, very good article posted today showing how just with 3 graphs, the entire climate change argument can be destroyed. So let me highlight these 3 graphs. The 3 graphs are basically, one is a long-term historical trend. And Chris, you can show probably the graphs, there you go, right as we're going along. What that first graph shows is that over 600 million years, the purple line, you can see the purple line there, we have the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has dramatically reduced. So we are not in a period of time where we are having an increase in carbon dioxide because of the Industrial Revolution. It's essentially looking at the wrong time series. Carbon dioxide was a much higher concentration. Earth's age is, let's say, 4.6 billion years. 80% of the Earth's history, pre-Cambrian period, there was nothing living on the surface of the Earth. Okay, so it's all of the life is in the last 20% of Earth's history, and carbon dioxide has decreased in the atmosphere throughout that time. We've had ice ages in that time. The second is a long-term historical record, which does show that there's a relationship between temperature and carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide increases, lag temperature increases. They don't cause it. They lag it. First, the temperature goes up, and then we see an increase in carbon dioxide. Why? Well, essentially, when the Earth heats up, gases, including carbon dioxide, are expelled from the oceans. When they cool, carbon dioxide is absorbed. Warm weather can hold less dissolved gas. So you basically have a phenomenon here where the Earth releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as the Earth warms. This also allows the Earth to become green because carbon dioxide is plant food. And we today have a more abundant interglacial warming period, which we are in. We are having a abundance of carbon dioxide, which does produce a greener Earth. But it is not an historically high amount of carbon dioxide, and nor is it caused by the burning of hydrocarbon fuels. The human beings are actually responsible for very little of the hydrocarbon fuel, of the carbon dioxide that's emitted by the Earth, probably only about 3%. In physics, a very interesting study was done by Will Happer and another physicist from York University in Toronto, where they were looking at this kind of bell curve of Earth irradiance, how much sunlight we get from the sun, and what an increase in carbon dioxide would mean. What they say is that at 400 parts per million, carbon dioxide begins to have a greenhouse effect. It reduces essentially, but the point is, we're nowhere near 400 parts per million. Doubling the standard concentration of carbon dioxide from 400 to 800 parts per million has almost no additional greenhouse gas effect. It simply is, it's a minor molecule. And what these bits of data say that if you put together the carbon dioxide environmental threat, it's minimal. And the argument that by burning hydrocarbon fuels, we are causing ourselves to go into extinction is an ideologically based argument. It is not truth-based. It is not fact-based. Chris, do you want to comment?
Oh, imagine that. How can facts get in the way of a narrative? Look, these facts can't scare anybody to changing their lifestyle, so a few can have the good stuff, and the rest of us have to have all the scraps. To be perfectly honest with you.
Well, that's the point, and I want to highlight another book which I find to be really important. This is a book by Ian Plimer. It's spelled Plimer. He is a climate scientist from Australia, and what he has done is essentially written a brilliant book here. I've quoted him extensively in my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. But he's Australia's best known geologist, professor emeritus of earth sciences at the University of Melbourne, where he was professor and head of the earth sciences department from 1991 to 2005. After serving at the University of Newcastle 1985 to 1991 as professor and head of geology. Now, what his book cites, and I want to read a couple of paragraphs of it, says, he starts out in his introduction, if green activism achieves its aims, the third world will remain in poverty. Western countries will become impoverished and even more reliant on China, which uses climate change as a weapon against the West. Many green leaders have an unhealthy obsession with death, killing, catastrophes, totalitarianism, and restrictions of freedoms. Green leaders are anti-environment, hypocritical, and fraudulent, and use green policies to make money for woke Western businesses and China. If green activists were actually concerned about their fellow human beings and the environment, they would support cheap, reliable, 24/7 fossil fuel and nuclear-generated electricity. Over the last 50 years, global per capita GDP, longevity, health, crop, land, productivity, and forests have increased due to technology, use of hydrocarbon fuels, and a slight increase in plant food in the air. We are now feeding more people from less land. Global pollution has decreased. The planet is improving. Wealth has solved environmental problems, not green. Coal brought people out of poverty, grinding poverty and misery in the Industrial Revolution, and later hundreds of millions of Chinese out of crippling poverty. Policies of green activists attempt to reverse these gains. It has never been shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. At the same time, you're having this agenda imposed upon the world, and it will result in, especially in the third world, much more starvation and death, because you will not be able to have the nitrogen fertilizers and other produced minerals, etc., that help with farming to expand greater food production over less land. This book is filled with a lot of truthful knowledge and really shows that, for instance, climate science ignores the scientific method, as does climate science peer or PAL review. Consensus and settled science are terms to enforce green activism and political certainty. These are not words of science. Climate science is not in accord with what is known from the geological past, archaeology, history, and experiments. Climate science is one method of promoting government policy, and UN and beneficiaries such as China, Russia, and many Western businesses global climate will not change by gifting more money to the UN. In the past, climate change due to tectonic, galactic, orbital, solar, ocean, and lunar cycles, past climate changes are not driven by carbon dioxide. These are the fundamental points of this age of disinformation that we're living in. And Chris, if you want to comment, I want to pivot to one more change in focus here. But I want to tie this together with the woke neo-Marxist cultural Maoism. So, Chris,
I will say this: the Marxist woke neo-culturalists, the neo-Marxists, these people who you're talking about now, they took some major hits last week. We talked about Argentina, but let's not dissolve Norway. That was a left stronghold for so many years, and now the people are fighting back here. The Democrats in America have patted themselves on the back over predictable elections, yet you don't see any coverage about what happened in Louisiana. This is a turn against the neo-Marxists. And the fact is, the more facts and truth gets out there to people who are willing to listen, the more they understand reality, the more they understand how they're being manipulated. And the neo-Marxists really, they're going to be licking their wounds for a little while, but I wonder what they're going to try to pull in 2024.
Well, they're good at creating crises, which then have dramatic effects on engineering people's reactions. So, and this is increasingly being discussed, and increasingly, I'm just finishing now with David Mantik a book on the Kennedy assassination, which I think is going to be startling to people. And we're going to be able to demonstrate the government's responsibility in that coup d'etat and demonstrate it scientifically. Now, I want to read a paragraph or two from what I wrote here. This is in the conclusion, quo vadis, where are we going with all this nonsense? The end days of the woke social justice utopia are dystopian. Governments and currencies collapse, mass numbers of people die through starvation and disease, and the world plunges into thermonuclear war. But the end of times need not be written this way. Getting the truth out about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy into print is an important first step. Where enough people understand the critical theory that lies behind this, dominates this age of disinformation, we have a chance of becoming awake instead of woke. We today look upon the madness that descended over Europe as Hitler's Nazism battled with Stalin's communism. We wonder how civilized people living in cultures considered advanced could possibly have descended into the horrors of World War II. The human species survived World War II, but it may not survive a thermonuclear World War III. Now, fundamentally, we're fighting here a war that's a good and evil. This whole new, and I want to distinguish, neo-Marxism is a specific term that refers to the fact that Marxism failed. Marxism predicted that the workers of the world would rise up and destroy capitalism because their labor was being abused, subordinated, and stolen by capitalists. And that the labor unions started sharing the wealth. The 20th century built a strong middle class, and Marxism went into a tailspin. So the Frankfurt School began recovering it, largely with the instruction of Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian communist who was in prison and wrote notebooks between the world wars. Gramsci said, you've got to attack the culture of capitalism. So they started attacking God. They started attacking the family. A cultural Maoism is again a distinct term. It refers to, that's Gramsci, refers to the Cultural Revolution that occurred in China after the Great Leap Forward killed millions in starvation when Mao took over power. It was a great shaming with the Red Guard youths running around with these little red books of Mao's sayings and confronting anyone who was establishment, shaming them, deplatforming them, sending them to thought reform camps.
Sounds familiar.
Right. I mean, it's again the same agenda that the left has today. And we are going through cultural Maoism, where the woke agenda, with all of its insanity, is sought to be imposed on us as normal, and we're not allowed to object to it. That includes the cultural diversity. So again, which it imposes race quotas. How many of this race do we need? How many of that race do we need? How many, rather than admitting into universities by who's most qualified, we have to get cultural diversity, which means racial diversity. And it also then means different countries, and it means different genders have to all be mixed together, so that if we have the right combination of transgenders and LGBT plus mixed together with the right mix of races, with the right mix of nationalities, then suddenly we've got a Tower of Babel, because everybody's schizophrenia competes with everybody else's schizophrenia. The only thing they can agree upon is you can't argue with who they say they are, which is fundamentally anarchy. That's where these concepts are destructive, and they were meant to be destructive. They were built to be constructed.
They can identify as anything. You know what? I identify as an octopus. This way, if somebody annoys me, I can squirt ink at them whenever I feel like it. If they're just really bothering me or making me or pulling some woke garbage on me, but I can say, hey, I identify as an octopus, and it's my right because I defend myself by squirting ink at people. So it's self-defense.
Well, we do enter into this kind of absolute insanity. Pope Leo XIII had a vision of Satan coming into the church and into the world, and he never envisioned today's postmodern woke culture. It's the current version of the Garden of Eden's tree of knowledge, the best one that Satan's ever constructed. Let's just eat of this insanity, and then you'll know what God knows, and we all can become transhuman. I end this book by saying the remedy, as I end these podcasts, is in 2 Chronicles 7:14, that we need to get on our knees and to ask God to forgive us for allowing America to descend into this madness. That 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if we do so, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. We're going to go through the judgment of God, and I see it in the Ukraine war, which is now in stalemate, and yet the Biden administration is continuing to send money. I don't think the Biden administration wants to let go of the money laundering facilities and the bribery facilities that are Ukraine. Of course, our Department of Justice will do nothing to prosecute the Biden family. And the Bidens are probably likely to run Joe Biden again, even though it appears his cognitive inability is accelerating. The attacks on Donald Trump have intensified. What we're seeing with Robert Kennedy is, I think, a new equation into the 2024 election, which is going to be very dynamic, and it's going to rearrange our politics. We're going through a moment of transition right now. Great darkness. It's like the witch hunt in medieval times, when that insanity caught a hold of people and they started burning women at the stake. This woke social justice popular delusion will pass from the face of the earth. With God, all things are possible, and the judgment of God is not going to be particularly fun. I think through 2023, we have had the economy cripple along with a bunch of patches put together by the Federal Reserve and pumping of money into the economy. This whole printing of money, we're going to be very quickly at $34 trillion in national debt. And that rate of national debt is just going to accelerate. I suspect 2024, there'll be an attempt by the powers that be not to have the global crash occur until the next administration, not to have Taiwan invaded or the war in the Middle East dramatically expand. What is going on is an attempt to just keep the lid on for a while longer in order to get through this election cycle and have the the World Economic Forum, the Bill Gateses behind the scenes, control and hold on to power, deluding the population with this woke nonsense that I believe will be intensifying over the next period of time. I continue to see it and monitor on Google all the posts about climate change and global warming. I just want to read you the average daily fare of what this produces. Let me find here the emails that I'm getting. I get them every day. But for instance, over the weekend, the Google alerts on climate were the Guardian view on carbon dioxide. Climate policies must target the private jet set. Okay, and snowfall is changing across the globe because as temperatures warm, because of human caused climate change. A NOAA scientist says that we're going to have less snow, and that global warming, heat, disease, air pollution, how climate change impacts health. That's from France 24, France 24, 24, it's their news agency. Progress on climate change has been too slow. Only 30 days of winter as global warming disrupts the traditional seasonal cycles. I want to end today by highlighting that this is not necessarily by any means the conventional wisdom. There are scientists that say we're entering into a global minimum. It's an article that was published by several climate scientists. It was cited by Plimler in his book. The main scientist is a gentleman named Valentina Zarkova, Zharkova. He's from Newcastle in the UK. And he published an article in a journal called Temperature, in which he was predicting, based upon monitoring sun activity, that we're going into a grand solar minimum, started in 2020 and ends in 2053, that will lead to a significant reduction of solar magnetic field and activity, like during the Maunder minimum, leading to a noticeable reduction of terrestrial temperature. In my book, I hint at that too. I say we're at the beginning of this new sun cycle, and it looks like the sun is slowing down in its sunspot activity. It'd be ironic if after this huge global warming scare, we enter into a 25-year period of time or 50-year period of time in which the Earth actually starts cooling again. The major impact on the Earth's temperature is the sun. The sun is our source of light and temperature, heat, and the impacts of clouds are much more important than carbon dioxide. The impact of our orbit around the sun, the Milankovitch cycles, we get farther away and more elliptical, more egg-shaped in our orbit. We have an ice age about every 100,000 years. We are going through a shift in the ocean currents. We've got this shift between La Nina and El Nino. Right now, it looks like we may have a drier and warmer winter in the Northeast, but other parts of the country are going to have more snow and be colder, which are not traditionally as cold, namely the South of the United States and the Southwest. These are magnificent changes in energy that are far beyond the human being's capability of producing. Yet, this whole neo-Marxist movement wants us to believe that human beings are really the blight of the earth, that we are evil, we need to be destroyed, and we'll perfect human beings, but at the same time, we've got to get rid of most of them. We exhale carbon dioxide. So according to this insanity, we're the cause of our own destruction. I want to sum up by emphasizing that this is an era in which we need to come back to God, a population which stops moral education of children, that takes God out of the schools, that authorizes the killing of babies, chopping them to pieces in the womb, is a society that is doomed to go through God's judgment, and we will do so. I think there's enough people, however, who have come to recognize this insanity and who have come back to God, that I don't think God created the human race to fail. We will get through this period of time, and I urge you to join me in going through what we're instructed to do in 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get on our knees and ask God's forgiveness for allowing human nature, our current civilization, to get to this low point of insanity and disinformation. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. This is thetruthcentral.com. We're broadcasting in a lot of channels. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, we're on Rumble, we're on BitChute, we're broadcasting it audio only, and we'll be doing a lot in 2024 to expand the reach of this program. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.